So you have been looking also at some cases, and as I understand it, perhaps it doesn't appear quite clear today where it's at. So I guess you could state, Christian, Hans Christian, is it really possible to have a profitable transition to a circular economy as you've been looking at it? So the floor is yours, and here's your clicker.
Thank you.
Here you go, Hans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The harsh answer to that question is, in the cases that we have been looking on, is no, at a short term. And what we have been doing is to look into some cases at Regnskap Norge and in a cluster that I'm talking about later, to look at the profitability and the ability to have a good transition from linear to circular economy. There are many reasons why they don't succeed in the short term, and one is scalability. Because a lot of these cases that we look on, they are small, there are existing businesses that do linear economy, and they want to transform their business to a circular, and they start small. And it's difficult to make profits if you don't have a scale. And the other problem that we have identified is that they have low margins, for example, in many electronic industries and others. If you already have low margins, it's difficult to sell and take back goods, to repair them and sell them again, because it's almost easier to buy a new one. So that's one of the problems that we look into. We have a double VAT issue. You can invoice, for example, furniture with VAT, and then you take it back. When you buy it, you do not include VAT, and then you sell it again and you have VAT again, which is a double VAT issue. And it's logistics, it's costly to move goods around, to reuse and such, and it's also a problem with financing. So there are things that need to be in place in order to make it profitable. But what we can look into is that, are there any ways to stimulate activities and behavior in order to get to more profitable situation? And why on earth are accountants in a circular economy conference? And Regnskap Norge has about 8,000 members, 2,500 firms that are members, and they work, have assignments on about 412,000 companies. So the impact of the accountants towards the SMB market is quite huge. So if the accountants can stimulate and help in the transition from the linear to circular economy, they will have a broad client base to work on. So that's the reason why we find this quite interesting. If you look at the history, we have had an abundance of resources, and consumers want to consume more and more, and that was the historic situation, and all the accounting principles and tax systems were based on a linear economy. And what we see now is that this doesn't fit anymore. And one of the biggest challenges that we see is that if you look at the accounts for a company today, they only report on the internalities. What kind of people they have employed, what kind of resources they buy into this. But they do not report on maybe one of the most important things, and that's externalities. Because many companies have used resources for free, and they have just taken that for granted, but they have never reported it. So what we see is that the accounts that is published today for a company does not show the full picture. And a company that really is in a linear economy that shows profit may be not profitable because they are using resources from the society. So that's a difficult question to include, and there are some good initiatives like the Global Reporting Initiative and Integrated Reporting, where they try to broaden what is reported on. But what's the problem? It's a pick and choose system. So the companies can pick what kind of metrics they want to report, and they will obviously report on the good ones and hide the bad ones. So when you have a pick and choose thing, it's difficult for an investor to understand, should I put money into company A or into company B? Because they report quite different. They look very green or circular, but they're really not showing the bad figures. So how do I know as an investor what kind of company I should invest in? So that's one of the things that we need to look into. But from a financial perspective, what we see is that there are three important components that we need to look at. And obviously, as many of the talks today, and as probably yesterday as well, innovation and new business models is fundamental. So that is the basis for the transition to circular economy. But the fact is that when you innovate, it will have an impact on the economy and the accounting, because there are different ways of measuring things and reporting on things. And obviously, we need to find new ways to finance these companies. Because the traditional banking industry and the financiers, they look in a linear perspective on circular companies, and they don't want to lend money to them. So that's a big problem. So we need to coordinate with Finans Norge how the business is looking into the finance part. There are many different business models. These are few business models that we look at in Regnskap Norge. And all of these types will, in some way or the other, influence the way they do accounting and how they do the financial reporting and taxes as well. So some of the issues that we meet in these different models, some of them are really easy to solve because the rules, taxation rules, and accounting rules, they are applicable and okay. But many issues that we meet need to go deeper into the problems and analyze what is the proper way to report and to do taxes. Some of the things that we've been looking into from an accounting perspective is the accounting principles. First, I mentioned before the comparability, you know, company A, company B. We need to have standards to be able to compare companies that are somewhat equal. So not a pick and choose system that we have today. We have been looking at the Norwegian accounting principles versus IFRS. And what we see is that IFRS has a better basis for a circular economy reporting, because what they do have more in IFRS reporting is fair value, market value, and value in use. So there are more ways to evaluate what you have in the balance sheet. So probably IFRS is a better choice in a circular economy. Problem is that it's not that well used in Norway, except for listed companies. Well, what is recognized in the balance sheet? This is a thing that we look at in many cases. You know, either if you keep ownership of the products that you have, your balance sheet will grow, which is sometimes good, sometimes not so good if you want finance. Other times it will be quite small, but it doesn't reflect the business that you're running because you are using your third-party components in your value chain. So what is recognized in the balance sheet and what value do we put it into? Because in the Norwegian GAAP, it's based on historical cost, which is not so relevant in the circular economy because what you have bought it for is not interesting. What's interesting is how can I reuse this or redesign it or rethink and then have a new value. So we need to expand the way we measure the value of this item. And then when you have bought it and you want to revalue or measure it at a later point, what kind of value do you use? And there's one thing that is lacking in IFRS is the value in use for others. Because if I have a stack of clothes that has no value because I cannot sell the clothes, it's out of fashion, it has a value for the building industry as building materials. So value in use for others may be something that we have to look closer into. Internalities and externalities I've talked about, and some of the cases that we have been looking at, they have been talking about putting more explanation in the notes to the accounts than in the accounts, but that's not a good solution because we need to count things. So what's counted counts. When it comes to tax, the tax area, there are two ways that we can, or the government can stimulate. One could use the deferred tax. That means that you pay taxes later. So you can have a benefit from paying the taxes later, or a permanent tax relief that you never have to pay those taxes. And depreciation rules is one way to defer taxes, that you have a way to have aggressive depreciation, so you have good tax benefit in the beginning of the life of the item, and then you have to pay taxes later. And also, what we have seen is realization, because if you have an inventory that is obsolete, the only way to get a tax relief is to throw it, burn it, just disintegrate it. And that's not a good way of using resources. But the tax system kind of motivates you to burn things. And it's crazy. So what if you could have tax relief now, but you can pay taxes if you reuse it in a circular model? That's possible. Also, what we see is that when you sell things and take back things to repair and resell, there are a lot of people that can be utilized. And from NAV, or the Norwegian Labour and Welfare Administration, you can utilize the workforce that is not active today, because they are very good at repairing things and sorting things out. So that's several things that we could look at. So I think that the government should make the tax rules and the accounting principles more in line with circular economy, because they are based today on a linear economy and a linear behavior. So I think it's more important that they actually stimulate and use some money on that. So that would be a good idea. So there are a lot of accounting and taxing challenges there, and a lot of the things is not so much recognition that it should be in the balance sheet. That's probably not the biggest problem. The problem is at which value and who is determining the value. What IBM in the Netherlands have been doing is to look at the building industry, and they are creating a platform where the builder and the guys turning the building down they are meeting, and there are different people working together. And what they create is an active marketplace, so they can show the value in an active marketplace. But we only have that for a few things. But it's difficult for other types of companies to put a value on what they have. We had an example at Regnskap Norge, where some women had bought some leather jackets, and they were really out of fashion. They could not be sold in Norway, not Eastern Europe, nowhere. And but the product itself, the skin was really good. So what they thought was that we will redesign this to purses, and that should have a value. And so they estimated value for the skin, and what the bank said is no way. You have not proven that it's sellable as jackets, so why should you be able to sell it as other goods? So they are in a discussion, what do we do? And that's really a problem. So, and then if we have a lifespan of a product or an asset, if that, usually you buy it at a certain amount and then you depreciate it down to zero. But in a circular economy, it will probably not be zero, the end value of the item. So it will be higher, but what will the value be? And that's a big problem, that we need to find standards, accounting standards, that support the thoughts and that you can demonstrate a circular business model. And accounting and tax value and obligations when you rent out things, lease, VAT I've been talking about. And some companies, I've been talking to Fjong, and one of their problems, they rent clothes out to women. One of their problems is most of the assets they have, the dresses, are not in the balance sheet. So it looks really strange, because the dresses are owned by private people. So they cannot show the value of this in their balance sheet. The other thing is like Flock with Haag. They will probably not sell office furniture in the future, maybe, but they will have it in control. So they will have it in the balance sheet, and they will increase the balance sheet. And how does that look at? It doesn't look good from a financial perspective. And the cash flow is different when you sell contra you rent out. So there are a lot of things here to take into consideration. So now you understand why I'm doing this. A lot of challenges. Just a reminder that there are some when you innovate new business models and go transfer to the circular economy, there are a lot of money to get from different initiatives. Only a reminder on that one. Look at these guys. They're kind people and they want to do good in the world. We have, in Regnskap Norge, we have taken the initiative to create a circular accounting cluster. And what we do is that we bring together academia, we bring along accountants and their clients. And what we do in this cluster is that we discuss concrete cases. We are in a case-based cluster. So both Flock and Fjong, Bergans and others will come to us, and they have accounting issues, they have tax issues, indirect taxes, direct taxes, and we will discuss. And the point with this cluster is not necessarily to solve all problems, because some problems are easy to solve, others are really difficult to solve. That can be recognition of revenue, that can be when you take cost, how you depreciate the value in the balance sheet and such. And so what we will do is that twofold. One, we will give advice to the companies that we analyze. But the other thing is that we may identify things that need to address to the government. So we need to advise the government how to design the accounting principles, how to design the tax system in order to stimulate the correct behavior and the transition from linear to circular. So we will be very close to the politicians in Norway, and we will influence this in a great way. And this is only telling that we work case-based, so I won't repeat that. But so we are with Katrine Barth in Circular Norway, obviously. We are one of the founders of Circular Norway. We do consultations with the parliament to influence the politicians. And we also work with IT solution, ERP system providers in order to measure more or relevant metrics so that you can capture data and report on data in a good way. And also we use some resources on the European projects where we look into, amongst other things, the valuation of inventory according to IFRS. So we are trying to do a lot of things in this, in the Regnskap Norge and in the accounting cluster. Finally, just the three takeaways. The accounting principles, we need to have new accounting principles that take more into consideration the circular principles. And we should be better valuation in the balance sheet, in the accounts, and also we need to influence the politicians in regard to taxes. So, that was that.
All right, thank you. Let's give him a hand.